Hey guys, Colton here. Real quick before we get into the episode, I want to talk to you about the future of chasing masculinity. I want to let you know that we're not going anywhere, but that how it's going to look moving forward is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to move away from the weekly episodes just to make sure that, well, one, I don't get burnt out, but two, that I keep the material that's coming actually important and meaningful and doesn't feel like it's forced or manufactured. So, moving forward, I don't know if there's going to be any disruption in the weekly episodes for a while, but just wanted to say that the episodes are going to come as they come and they're not going to be on the Wednesday morning weekly occurrence. So, thank you for listening. I'll let you get back to the episode. Hello, and welcome back to Chasing Masculinity. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It is going to be intentionally practical. This one is going to be for the guys who have found themselves reaching for whiskey more often as they've gotten older. Not to drink more, but to enjoy it more. There's something about whiskey that for some reason tends to grab men in their 20s, 30s, and it sticks with them for life. There's like a patience behind it, the craftsmanship, the ritual of it. It's not necessarily about excess or going to higher proofs. It's kind of about the appreciation of the flavor. Most guys who say they don't like whiskey, I feel like we're never taught how to taste it. They shoot it down or put it in a mixer or power through that burn and assume that that's all there is. But whiskey, like most things, to be fair, that are worth understanding, rewards slowing down and actually paying attention. So in this episode, I want to walk through whiskey, hopefully the right way. We're going to start with what whiskey actually is, how it's made, then break down the major types of whiskey so you understand what you're drinking and why different bottles taste so different. We'll talk about the glassware and why the vessel matters more than you might actually realize. And then I'm hoping to show you how to taste whiskey a little bit properly out of each of those glasses. And then we will finish the episode by covering the official tasting terminology so you can identify those flavors and aromas without sounding made up or pretentious. Now, this isn't about becoming a snob. It's not about drinking more. It's about learning how to enjoy something well with that intention and restraint. And if you really enjoy whiskey already and you're at a different level, this might be a little bit too basic for you. This is really for the guys who are just getting into it or who are like me and really enjoy it but never actually spent the time to learn more about it. So with that, let's get into today's episode. So I want to start this by just talking about what whiskey is. I think most people know what whiskey is, but whiskey truly is, where it comes from, the different ingredients. I want to kind of build upon this foundation so you know what you're actually drinking. I want to demystify whiskey before we get into how to taste it. Now, the definition of whiskey. Whiskey is a distilled spirit. It is made from fermented grain mash. Grain is converted into sugar into alcohol. That's why it gets its alcohol content. There is an aging that is required. It's aged in wood barrels, most commonly oak. Although aging is not necessarily optional, it certainly can define whiskeys. Now, whiskey is not just a type of strong alcohol. It is a controlled fermentation, distillation, and aging process. The core components of whiskey are: one, you have your grain. This is what the mash is made from that allows it to be fermented. That could be corn, barley, could be rye, it could be wheat. And the different types of grain choice determine what type of whiskey it is. It shapes the sweetness, the spice, the body, etc. The next core component is water. This might seem weird.
because it's often overlooked, but it's still critical because it's used during both the mashing and the proofing process. And the local water sources have actually historically shaped the regional styles of each type of whiskey. Now, the next core component is yeast. This is what's going to convert that sugar from the grain into the alcohol. This is producing the esters and flavor compounds. The different types of yeast or mounts create different flavor profiles. And then there is the wood barrel. Oak barrels influence the color, aroma, flavor. There's a char level. The inside of the barrels are charred that give different types of flavor to the whiskey. And there's also barrel history, how much it's used, where it's from, how old the wood is, what region of the world it's from. Now, the next and last one that I have to talk about that is kind of the core basic components of whiskey is time. Not just age statements, but time actually allows any sort of integration or mellowing or complexity. Older, however, does not necessarily mean better. We'll get into that more. The key idea here is whiskey is built. It's a process. There's lots of little fine-tuning. It's not something that's rushed to get a high-proof alcohol. Now I want to talk about why the aging matters. There is an interaction with the wood. It's in a wood barrel, and that flavor is working both ways, from the wood and from the whiskey. The barrel char creates the caramelized sugars. You could get extracts of vanillin, you can get the tannins, you can get the spice based on how the whiskey interacts with the wood. And there's also a color development as well. The clear spirit, it's clear colored, enters the barrel. And then the color comes from the wood. It's not just aging alone. That's why wood also plays a big role in the type of color and then how long it sits with that wood. Then there's evaporation and oxidation. That's called Angel's share. It's going to dissipate. You're not going to get the exact amount you put in when you take it out. There's a concentration of flavors over time that means. You're getting less liquid. So when you put it in and then you take what percent you get back from that flavor is stronger. It's more concentrated. And there could be softening or harsher notes of alcohol depending on how much and how long. Now, the last thing I want to talk about what whiskey is at its basics is the alcohol, specifically the alcohol by volume. The typical range would be the minimum around 40% ABV, and then whiskeys can be bottled much higher than that. I've seen them go all the way up into the 70 ABF. Some whiskeys are bottled higher, some are lower. It all depends. There's a misconception, though. Higher proof does not mean higher quality. You'll usually see this with a higher price tag sometimes, but if you see a really expensive bottle and it has a lower proof or a lower alcohol by volume, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is worse and overpriced. And if you see a cheap whiskey with a really high ABV, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting a good bang for your buck and it's a high-quality whiskey. Higher proof definitely means more intensity. It doesn't, however, necessarily equate to the craftsmanship that went behind it. I have whiskeys that are much higher in proof and taste very mellow, and some that are surprisingly low in proof, and they taste like the strongest whiskeys I have in my shelf. It all just kind of depends on a lot of factors, not necessarily the alcohol percentage. And learning how to chase the flavor and not just the proof, not just the alcohol, the hit, the effects of it, that's an important aspect of whiskey tasting as well. Now, I want to talk about the different types of whiskey. Obviously, we've talked about what whiskey is now, everything there is, and based on all these different variables, there's a lot of different types that can come out from this. These aren't necessarily a way to distinguish brands, but there are a lot of categories that whiskey can fall under, and you can enjoy all of them or you can have your specific niche. The first is Scotch whiskey. Now, this is a geographic definition. Obviously, it's made in Scotland. The grain type is typically malted barley. Now, the flavor association with this is more of a smoke and peat. They're present, but they're not universal to all Scotches. The two major categories are your single malts, made in one distillery from malted barley, or your blended. It's a combination of malt and grain whiskeys. Now, not all Scotch is smoky, but that can certainly be a stereotype that goes along with it. Now, the next is bourbon. This one is very popular, especially in the United States. Bourbon whiskey. This has to be made in the United States. That's the qualification. And there's a grain bill. That means it has to be at least 51% corn. That's one of the grains that whiskey can be made from. And there's also a barrel requirement. It's new charred oak barrels. So new barrels that have been charred in oak. Now, the common flavors that you're going to get from this now, because of those, you're going to get, because of the corn, because of the newer charred oak barrels, you're going to get more common flavors of vanilla or caramel or brown sugar. Its general profile is a little bit more sweeter, fuller, and it's much more approachable, which is why so many people like it. It doesn't mean if you like bourbon that you're a beginner and that it's an introductory training wheels whiskey. I know many people who have traveled the world and who have tried all different types of whiskeys, and they still go back to bourbons. It's all about what you like. Now, the next whiskey is rye whiskey. And similar to bourbon, it has a grain bill. That means it has to be at least 51% rye. Rye is a type of grain, hence it being called rye whiskey. The flavor profile for this is going to be a little bit spicier, a little bit drier. Some people might think it has a little bit more of a bite. Some people love it. Some people really avoid it because it might have less sweetness, maybe some sharper edges. This is just a general note. There's certainly ryes, along with any of these types of whiskeys, that could fall into many categories. Now, another one is Irish whiskey. Again, Irish whiskey, you can understand the name has the geographical constraints. It has a production style as well. It's typically triple distilled. That's typically. It's got a lighter mouthfeel for its texture and a smoother finish. It's very approachable, and people just like drinking this neat. This is one that is often recommended for beginners because it has a lower perceived heat. That heat is the alcohol on your mouth when you drink something. The last one that I want to talk about is a Japanese whiskey. Now, this has been inspired or influenced by the Scottish tradition. Its philosophy, precision, balance, its harmony are kind of similar, but its flavor profile is more clean or refined or subtle. Again, these are all just broad statements about different types of whiskey. There are certainly bottles that fall into many of these different categories. The key takeaway from all of this is different does not mean better or worse. I personally like all of them, and it just kind of depends what mood I'm in and what I want to enjoy. Different doesn't mean better or worse. It just means preference. Now let's talk about how you taste whiskey, as in the vessels for actually drinking it. The environment that you are consuming whiskey in affects its perception. That's why glassware matters. There is an aroma concentration that can be held within the glass. Most flavor is actually experienced through the smell. The shape affects its experience. The wide openings could disperse aromas where narrow openings might focus them. And there's that flavor perception. The glass choice influences how that alcohol then hits the nose. To start, if you know anything or you can even think of a stereotypical whiskey tasting, you would think of the Glencairn glass. This is the industry standard. This is used in distilleries, tastings, people have them in their homes. This is your whiskey tasting glass. It's in a small tulip shape, so it's got a wide bowl that can allow it to swirl around, such like a wine glass, but a very narrow rim that's going to help you concentrate the aromas when you want to smell it. Now, this is best used if you're learning or evaluating or comparing, if you really want to get in depth with the flavor. The next type of glass is just your rocks glass. This is the wide mouth, thin base. This would be your stereotypical whiskey glass. This is going to allow the aroma to disperse. There's going to be a less concentrated nose appeal to it. This is more for just casual drinking and enjoyment rather than an actual analysis. This is kind of my go-to if I just want to grab a whiskey and enjoy it. Now, the next type of glass would be your copita or your tulip glass. This is a professional wine tasting glass. This is used by blenders. Its function is to really enhance the precision and sharpen the aroma identification. It's really concentrating on the smell. They're much less common, but equally as effective, especially for maybe the more higher proof spirits. Now, I want to talk about the things that you can do to enhance your whiskey when you're drinking it, such as if you're drinking it neat versus ice or adding water to it. Neat whiskey means it's whiskey that's served at room temperature It's its purest expression. It's straight out of the bottle. And that's probably best for tasting and learning. You are not cutting it with anything. There's no ice, so it's not cold, and you're not cutting it with water to lessen its effects. It is whiskey straight from the bottle into the glass. That's neat. I used to never be able to touch neat whiskey. Now that's almost my go-to. It's just development over the years. How you prefer it, honestly. And the next thing you can do is add water. If you go to whiskey tasting, they'll provide you a pipette, and you can add drops of water at a time. And what this can do is maybe open up aromas and soften that alcohol heat. If you're just getting too much of that and you're not able to experience the full flavor profile, you can start cutting it with tiny drops of water. I've only ever seen this really been used in a professional tasting setting. I don't know if this is something that people regularly do when they consume, because the most go-to is with ice. This is going to drop the temperature of the whiskey, which might make it much more approachable. It's going to mute a lot of those aromas and maybe some of the flavor, but it is really easy to enjoy it. You're not necessarily evaluating it in depth. It's just more something that you want to enjoy, and it's more refreshing. I love an ice whiskey. If you do any sort of ice cubes, it's going to melt much quicker and water it down, which is why a lot of people like ice, is because you put ice with your whiskey, and within a few minutes you have a watered down, much more approachable glass. Or you can use the large whiskey ice cubes, which are singular, or even the stones, which won't allow any water to dilute the whiskey, but it still allows the temperature to drop. And those are just ways that you can enjoy the cold whiskey with less dilution. There's no right or wrong way. It really just comes down to experimenting and seeing what you like best. Now, I want to get into the crux of this episode, and that is how to taste whiskey properly, at least from my poor Google searches. I want to just real basic, real simple, go over some of the things that you can look for when you're tasting whiskey. But to start, we need to talk about how to actually do it. This is actually how I was taught by somebody who tastes whiskey on a amateur but frequent level. First is the visual examination. Why the heck does that matter? You're drinking it. Well, the first impression actually sets the expectation. The colors can give you cues, not necessarily conclusions about what you're getting into. The color range is going to be a lighter straw to a very deep amber, and you can note the clarity or the brightness of it. You can look to see if there's any particulates in it as well, to see if it's been contaminated with anything. The color is influenced by the barrel type and the char level of the previous used barrel. Age alone does not necessarily determine its darkness, and artificial coloring can absolutely be used in some cheaper whiskeys, so watch out for that as well. So don't necessarily equate a dark color with quality. Just look at it and enjoy it, and you can start seeing why some bourbons, even though they're very limited on what type of mash and what type of barrel and the aging process can do, still look so different. And you can start to differentiate why those are based on what their aging process looks like. The next is called nosing. That's to get the aroma, the smell. This is critical because this is what we actually call the taste, is the smell. There is a proper technique to this, and I am by no means an expert because I'm sure I do it wrong almost every time, but it's not to inhale deeply. You keep the mouth slightly open to reduce the alcohol burn, and you take short, gentle breaths. Here's how you can approach the nose. You move the glass slightly, you get the smell, you get the whiskey aerosolized so that the scents can be picked up in the glass. Like if you're using a Glencairn glass, you can swirl it around, and you move it up to your nose. You're not inhaling deeply, you're keeping your mouth slightly open, and you're taking those short, gentle breaths. You're moving the glass, and you're smelling from a distance. You start from far away. You can swirl and smell from a decent distance from your nose to see if you can start picking up any smells, any aroma, and you can move it closer depending on how strong you want to smell it. The common aroma categories that you could identify are, one, the grain, the cereal, the bread, the malt, what it's made from, or if there's any fruity smells, fresh or dried fruit. Are you getting sweetness to it? Or does it have a sweet or vanilla or caramel or honey scent? A lot of whiskeys are flavored and been cut with things to give it a more sweeter profile. So you could be smelling those directly, or based on the aging and fermentation process, some of those notes might come out naturally. there's also going to be a spice or a pepper or actual baking spices that you can pick up in those scents. You could also maybe detect the wood, the oak, the char level behind it. Does it have a smoke or a peat or ash? Just think about what you are picking up. What attributes could be identified with smelling it? The next is your actual palate. That's your taste. What are you tasting? Here's how you take the sip. Small amount, let it coat the tongue, hold it very briefly before swallowing. What you want to focus on is the texture or mouthfeel. Is it thin or is it oily? There's a viscosity level. Is it sharp or is it soft? Don't let it sit in your mouth. It's going to start burning. But you want to let it coat your tongue just enough to be able to pick up what is it? What is the texture like? Is there initial sweetness or dryness? Is there a mid-palate development that's happening as it sits there? There's a balance. Do the flavors work together? Do they clash? Is it have a sort of spicy, bitter attack? Is the alcohol integrated or is it just dominant? Does it just taste like you're drinking alcohol? And avoid rushing. The first few sips are going to acclimate the palate. I usually have to get through 2 or 3 sips before I can really get into it. The first few just feel like I'm fighting to get through the initial burn as my palate is acclimating to what I'm drinking. Next, move on to the finish. This is the experience after swallowing. You want to take the sip and you want to breathe out through the mouth immediately, allowing your nose passages to be opened. So you're breathing through the mouth, but you're not closing off your nose, because that's where, again, that's why you're smelling. That's where you're getting the taste from, is through the nose, the nasal passages. So you want to keep that open, but breathe through the mouth, because you're going to get the fire, the heat out right away. But then that's also what's allowing the flavor to work its way back in your nasal passages very slightly to get the flavor. And then you can observe, does it have a length of flavor? Is it short, medium, or long? Do you feel like after 30 seconds you need another sip to taste it? Or does it sit there for minutes after? Does it fade abruptly or is it gradual? And then what remains? Is there a spice that remains on your tongue? Is there a numbness? Is it sweet? Is there a warmth? Is there a bitterness? A long finish doesn't necessarily mean a good finish. Quality is going to matter more than duration, but you can certainly play with these. I personally like whiskeys that I don't feel like I have to constantly keep sipping to keep the flavor in my mouth. Now I want to move on to the official whiskey tasting terminology, and I think I got this right, but if there's any professionals out there, please feel free to correct me. I just want to give listeners a more shared language so they don't have to avoid this subject or any sort of theatrical descriptions of things. To start, the aroma and nose descriptors. There is a sweet. Again, this is what you're smelling. Sweet aromas usually come from the barrel influence and the grain choice. It's common in bourbons and then very well-aged whiskeys. Again, bourbons are going to be potentially more sweet. And how you taste it is you, again, approach the glass gently. The sweet notes tend to appear early on the nose, so you're not shoving it in your nose right away. And you're looking for the vanilla. That's often from the oak barrels, and it's going to be soft or round or familiar. Then there could be the caramel. This is the toasted sugar notes. It's deeper sweetness than vanilla. And then there's the honey as well. It's lighter. It's more a floral sweetness, really. It's very subtle, however. You could even get toffee, which is a richer, buttery sweetness. That one's usually paired well with the oak. What to watch out for is sweet aroma does not mean sweet taste. What it is the fruity notes often come from the yeast and fermentation. They can be fresh or dried. The next is the fruit. What is that? The fruit notes come from the yeast and the fermentation. It's not an actual cutting of fruit, although I'm sure there are plenty of flavored whiskeys out there that do. This comes from the yeast and fermentation process. This can be a fresh or dried smell. Let your nose linger slightly longer. Let the fruit notes appear after the initial alcohol burn. That's how you are able to identify the fruit. You're looking for things like apple, which could be clean or a crisp or fresher smell, or a pear, which is a softer, lighter, slightly sweet smell, or citrus, which is bright and sharp, sometimes even zesty. And you get the more dried fruit like the raisin or fig or date-like, and these are much deeper and richer. Now, watch out. Don't overthink specificity. Dried fruit versus fresh fruit is more important than actually naming the fruit. Just what hints are you picking up? The next is spice. This is what everyone thinks of when they think of whiskey. The spice comes from, well, all of it. The grain, the wood, the barrel char. So here's how you detect this. It often appears deeper in the nose. That's why it might feel like there's a burn. It's more noticeable after a few seconds. It has a tendency to linger. What you're looking out for is things like cinnamon. That's warm and sweet. Or clove, which is a little bit sharper but is very aromatic. Or nutmeg, which is very earthy and a rounded spice. Or a pepper, which is sharp and prickly and sometimes dry. The spice is not the same as the alcohol heat, however, so watch out for that. The next thing is the wood. This is a direct influence of the barrel. This is often the backbone of the aroma. Not necessarily the top note, what you're getting first, but the base. What you're looking out for is the oak. Is it dry? Is it structured? Is it grounding? This is the base of everything. The char, is it toasted, slightly smoky? Is there a tobacco to it? Is it dry, earthy, a mature aroma? Now, too much wood can actually dominate and flatten the complexity because this is the base, not the top. Now, the last thing that you can look out for is the smoke. This is the peat or the heavy barrel influence. This is usually unmistakable. It often hits immediately. You're looking out for the peat. That's the earthy, the medicinal, the smoky. Or the ash, which is dry. It's the burnt character. Or the leather. It's warm and worn and, again, earthy. Smoke can easily overpower the other notes, and not all smokes are created equal. That's why you want to approach the glass slowly to allow that to set in. Otherwise, it will overpower everything else. Here's some guidance for the nose, how you're tasting. Use what you can recognize. Don't make things up. If you can't name it, just identify the category. Things like fruity or smoky or wood. Broad definitions of what you're picking up. Totally fine. There's no need to force a descriptor. Silence is actually better than guessing. Now, here are the actual palate descriptors. This is what you're tasting. This is the translation from the aroma into the taste. The first is sweetness. That's the initial sweetness on the front of the tongue. Comes from that grain and barrel. Then the dryness. This would be the lack of sweetness. It's often going to appear mid or late in the palate. Now, sweet doesn't mean good, dry doesn't mean bad. It just kind of depends on the whiskey. Then there's the texture. There's the oiliness. Does it coat your tongue? This could often indicate a higher viscosity, such as your things like bullet. I think bullets have a really high viscosity. Or does the texture have a creaminess? Is it soft or a rounded mouthfeel? Is there a smooth integration? The next is alcohol presence. There's a heat. Is it a burn or is there warmth to it? Especially on the tongue or in the throat. There's an important distinction. Heat is not flavor. Well-made whiskeys integrate the alcohol. If you're just tasting heat and nothing else, maybe you're either tasting it wrong, smelling it wrong, or it's just not a high-quality whiskey. There are structural quantities. There's a balance. No element dominates one another. The flavors are working together. There's complexity, however. You're not tasting smokiness and nothing else. There's multiple layers that are revealed over time, not necessarily a chaos of everything clashing against each other. And the intensity, the strength of flavor, not the alcohol. Is it bold versus subtle? Not every whiskey is complex, true. Simplicity is not necessarily a flavor of a whiskey. Maybe that's its intent. Now, as you're finishing and you're breathing out and you're getting the final flavor profiles, here are the descriptors that you would use for that. There's the length. You have your short, which fades quickly, your medium, which lingers for a little while, and the long, where the flavor is going to remain a while after swallowing. Now, again, length doesn't mean quality. Then there's the character. Is it clean? Is it a clean finish with no bitterness? Or is it dry, where there's minimal sweetness that's going to remain? Or warming, where the gentle heat spreads through the throat or the chest? And does it linger? Is there a specific flavor that's going to persist longer than the rest? What to watch out for is harsh or bitter finishes. That could indicate an imbalance. Now, tasting is not about recognition or a performance. That confidence is only going to come from honesty. The goal is just understanding what you're tasting, not impressing anybody. Now, how can you develop your palate over time? The taste is trained. It's not necessarily innate. No one starts with a refined palate. Recognition is going to build through the repetition. It's not an excuse to drink more. This is just how you can start if this is something you want to pick up as a hobby. How can you practice this? You take it slow, one whiskey at a time, compare similar styles, bourbon to bourbon, rye to rye, and keep the simple notes, the aroma, the palate, the finish. Avoid the overthinking. The patterns are going to start emerging naturally. And avoid those common mistakes of chasing proof instead of flavor, or comparing whiskeys to just cocktails, which are more sweet, or judging quality just purely based on price. And also, too many samples in one sitting is going to dull your perception. You want to be sharp when you're doing this. So, my closing: drink with intention. Whiskey should be an appreciation of the craft or the time or the tradition of what you're doing. And learning to taste is a learning restraint. You're slowing down and you're paying attention. You're not just chugging alcohol. And be curious about it. Explore different styles. Use proper glassware. Drink less but enjoy it more. Whiskeys reward patience, just like most things worth mastering. All right, so this was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. So let's bring this one into land. There's one thing I hope you take away from this episode. It's that tasting whiskey isn't about being an expert or owning the right bottles with the right names. It's just about slowing down and paying attention and learning how to appreciate what's actually in the glass. Whiskey rewards patience. The more intentional you are with it, the more it's going to give you back. You don't need a refined palate to start. You build one by showing up, just like everything we talk about on this show. You have to show up and go through the reps. You're tasting carefully, you're using clear language, and you're being honest about what you experience. Not every whiskey is going to be complex. Not every pour is going to be memorable. That's okay. The discipline is in learning to notice, not chasing some perfect flavor. Like most things worthwhile, whiskey is best enjoyed with restraint. It's meant to be appreciated, not consumed mindlessly. When you take time to taste it properly, you're practicing things like patience, self-control, attentiveness, skills that carry far beyond the glass. So try different styles, use the right glass, take notes if it helps, slow down, let your understanding grow naturally. Whiskey, like anything, is worth mastering if you're curious about it. It's going to meet you where you are, and the rewards are going to come to those who are willing to learn. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of Chasing Masculinity. Until next time, guys, keep chasing. Before you go, I want to mention something briefly. If this podcast has been resonating with you, if the conversations around discipline, purpose, identity, and what it means to be a man today have been hitting close to home, then my book, 24 Rules of Masculinity, is officially out. It is a direct, practical guide built around the same principles we talk about here: biblical foundations, hard-earned lessons, and clear direction for men who want to live with intention instead of drifting. This isn't theory. It's meant to be picked up, applied, and just carried with you. So whether you're just starting to take ownership of your life or you're trying to realign and get it back on track, that's why I wrote it. You can find 24 Rules of Masculinity on Amazon or through the link in the description. If you do pick it up, I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.